The promotion was a ghost, a whisper in the hushed corridors of Sterling Corp Senior Project Manager, a title that meant a corner office, a team of my own, and a salary that would finally allow me to breathe. For 3 years, I had poured my life into this company. I was the first one in, the last one out. My projects were consistently under budget and ahead of schedule. I was good. I knew I was good. And I wanted that ghost to become a reality more than I had wanted anything in a long time. My boss, Miss Evelyn Vance, was a legend. She had shattered every glass ceiling she'd ever encountered, leaving a trail of intimidated competitors and adoring acolytes in her wake. She was sharp, charismatic, and possessed an almost supernatural ability to command a room with a single, arched eyebrow. In my first year, I had worshipped her. I copied her mannerisms, her crisp way of speaking, her ruthless efficiency. I saw her as the blueprint for my own success. She was everything I aspired to be. There were 2 of us in the running for the promotion. Me and a woman named Isabel from the marketing department. Isabel was good, but she was a peacock, all flash and loud presentations. I was the workhorse. I built things from the ground up. I knew the guts of the operation. In any sane world, the choice would be obvious. But Sterling Corp wasn't always a sane world. It was a kingdom, and Evelyn Vance sat on the throne. One Tuesday afternoon, she called me into her office. The office, floor to ceiling. Windows overlooking the city, a massive oak desk polished to a mirror shined the air, tasting of money and power. "Maya," she said, her voice a low purr that could be either comforting or predatory. She gestured to the leather chair opposite her. "Sit." I sat, my back ramrod straight, my hands clasped in my lap to keep them from trembling. "We're finalizing the decision on the senior manager role this week." She began, steepling her fingers. Her nails were perfect, a deep blood red. "You've done excellent work, Maya, truly. Your dedication has not gone unnoticed." A surge of hope shot through me. "Thank you, Miss Vance. I've worked very hard too." She held up a hand, cutting me off. "But dedication is only part of the equation," she continued, her gaze intense. "Leadership requires a personal connection, a certain rapport, loyalty that goes beyond the balance sheets." I nodded, trying to look wise and understanding, though I wasn't entirely sure what she meant. "Of course." She smiled, a slow, deliberate curve of her lips. It didn't reach her eyes. "I have a reservation on Friday night, at Celeste. Just the 2 of us. A celebratory dinner. We can discuss your future with the company in a more relaxed setting." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I think it would be very beneficial for you to be there." My mind raced. A dinner? At Celeste? The most expensive, exclusive restaurant in the city? It was unusual. But maybe this was how it worked at her level. The final interview, a test of social grace. "I'd be honored, Miss Vance," I said, a genuine smile finally breaking through my nervousness. "Excellent," she said, her eyes gleaming. "And Maya," she added as I stood to leave, "call me Evelyn." I walked out of her office feeling like I was floating on air. I had done it. It was happening. The ghost was finally taking shape. It never once occurred to me that she wasn't offering me a job. She was offering me a trade. The next few days were a blur of excitement and anxiety. I told my closest work friend, Clara, about the dinner. She was a data analyst with a healthy dose of cynicism. "Celeste," she whistled, her eyes wide. "Wow, Maya, that's huge. Vance is basically crowning you." "I know." I grinned, feeling a giddy sort of disbelief. "I need to buy a new dress." "Just be careful," Clara added, her expression turning serious. "Vance, she doesn't do anything without a reason. There's always an angle." I waved her concerns away. "She's just vetting me, making sure I can handle the corporate schmoozing side of things." But a small cold knot of doubt began to form in my stomach. Clara was right. Evelyn Vance was a chess player. Every move was calculated. What was this move? The day of the dinner, Evelyn was different. She sent me a text in the afternoon. "Looking forward to tonight. Wear that blue dress you wore to the quarterly review. It suits you." The knot in my stomach tightened. The dress was professional, but it was also form-fitting. I had felt confident in it, but the memory of her gaze on me that day suddenly felt less like appreciation and more like assessment. I pushed the thought away. I was being paranoid. This was just the pressure getting to me. That evening, she sent a car for me, a black town car with a silent driver. When I arrived at Celeste, she was already there, seated at a secluded corner table. She looked stunning in a black silk blouse, a single, expensive diamond necklace resting at her throat. She smiled as I approached, and the full force of her charisma washed over me. "Maya," she said, her voice a velvet whisper, "you look exquisite." "Thank you, Evelyn," I said, my cheeks flushing as I sat down. This is an incredible place, only the best, she replied, her eyes roaming over my face. For my best people. The dinner was a masterclass in seduction, not of a physical nature but of the mind. She complimented my work, my intelligence, my ambition. She spoke of a future where I was her right hand, her protégée. She painted a picture of a life I desperately wanted, and she placed herself at the very center of it. She made me feel like the most important person in the world. The wine flowed freely. I tried to be careful, taking small sips, but she was insistent. Relax, Maya, tonight is a celebration. As the main course was cleared, her hand covered mine on the table. Her skin was cool. The promotion is yours, she said softly. I've already decided. Isabel is competent, but she lacks your fire. Tears of relief pricked my eyes. Evelyn, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, she murmured, her thumb stroking the back of my hand. The gesture was no longer maternal or professional. It was intimate. My entire body went rigid. You just have to show me you're grateful. The air thickened. The ambient chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. My driver is waiting outside, she continued, her voice dropping even lower. He can take us back to my penthouse. We can finalize the details there. Over a nightcap, there it was, the other shoe. The one I had been pretending wasn't dangling over my head all night. The quid pro quo laid bare on a white tablecloth between the bread basket and the ridiculously expensive wine. My throat went dry. I don't think that's a good idea, I managed to choke out. Her smile vanished. Her eyes turned to chips of ice. She slowly pulled her hand away from mine. I see, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Perhaps I misjudged you, Maya. I thought you were ambitious. I thought you understood what it takes to get to the top. She took a sip of her wine, her gaze never leaving mine. It seems I was mistaken. A shame. Isabel is so eager to please. The message was crystal clear. The promotion wasn't a reward for my hard work. It was a prize to be won in her bed. The blood drained from my face. I felt sick. This woman I had idolized, this titan of industry. She was just a predator in a designer suit. Excuse me, I mumbled, pushing my chair back. I have to go. I practically ran from the restaurant, leaving her sitting there alone, queen on her gilded throne, her expression a mixture of contempt and amusement. I stumbled out into the cool night air, gasping for breath as if I had been holding it for hours. The doorman asked if I needed a taxi. I just shook my head and started walking, my heels clacking on the pavement like a frantic, terrified heartbeat. I walked for miles, not knowing where I was going, the picture she had painted of my future shattering into a million pieces around me. The next day at work was torture. I avoided Evelyn's office like it was radioactive. I could feel her eyes on me every time I had to walk down the main corridor. It wasn't an angry glare. It was worse. It was a look of pitying disdain, the look you'd give a stray dog that had refused a scrap of food. She knew she had me. I could either play her game or I could watch the promotion and likely my entire future at the company go to Isabel. I felt trapped, powerless, humiliated. I thought about quitting, just walking out and never looking back. But why should I be the one to leave? I had done nothing wrong. I had earned that promotion with my blood, sweat, and tears. The thought of her just handing it to someone else while I slunk away in defeat made my stomach churn with a new emotion, rage. That evening I met Clara at a small, dingy bar far from the polished towers of our corporate world. I told her everything. The hand-holding, the penthouse, the veiled threats. She listened patiently, her expression growing darker with every word. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, just stirring her drink with a plastic straw. I knew it. She finally said, her voice grim. I've heard whispers about another woman a few years ago. She left suddenly. No one knew why. Now I do. She looked at me, her eyes full of a fierce loyalty that made me want to weep. So what are you going to do? I don't know, I admitted, my voice cracking. If I go to HR, it's my word against hers. Who are they going to believe? Me or the executive vice president who brings in millions of dollars for them every quarter? So you're just going to let her win? Clara challenged. What other choice do I have? I cried, frustration boiling over. Clara leaned forward, her gaze sharp. You make it so it's not just your word against hers, she said slowly, a new idea dawning in her eyes. You get proof. You make her say it again. I stared at her. How? You have a smartphone, don't you? She said simply. It has a voice recorder. You go back to her. You tell her you've reconsidered, that you were just overwhelmed. You get her to spell it out, and then you burn her to the ground. The plan was terrifying, deceitful, manipulative. It was something Evelyn Vance would do, and that's why I knew it would work. A slow, cold resolve settled over me. She wanted me to play the game. Fine, but I would play it by my own rules. I would use her own tactics against her. The worship I once had for her was gone, replaced by a desire for justice so sharp it felt like a physical weapon in my hand. I wasn't just fighting for a promotion anymore. I was fighting for every woman she had ever done this to, and I was going to win. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. My stomach was in a perpetual state of churning dread. I downloaded a simple, discreet voice recording app on my phone and practiced using it until the motion of starting it was second nature. A single, quick tap on a black screen. No lights, no sounds. The hardest part was composing the email. It had to be the perfect blend of apology, ambition, and capitulation. After a dozen drafts I sent it. Evelyn, please accept my sincerest apologies for my behavior at dinner. You were right. I was overwhelmed, and I acted unprofessionally. The opportunity you presented is one I value deeply, and I would be a fool to let my momentary panic jeopardize my future at this company. If you are still willing, I would like to continue our conversation. Yours, Maya. Hit send and immediately felt a wave of self-loathing. The words were a betrayal of everything I believed in, but they were a necessary poison, a key to unlock the cage she had put me in. Her reply came less than 5 minutes later. My office. Tomorrow at p.m. I'm glad you came to your senses. I felt a cold thrill of fear and determination. The game was on. The following day I walked towards her office at 4:59 p.m., my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure she could hear it from down the hall. My phone was in my jacket pocket, my thumb resting on the screen. As I reached her door, I took a deep breath, tapped the screen to start the recording, and walked in. She was standing by the window looking out at the city. Close the door, she said without turning around. I did. The click of the latch sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. She turned to face me, a triumphant smirk on her face. So, you've decided to be a team player? Yes, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I want the promotion, Evelyn. I've earned it. Oh, you have, she agreed, walking slowly towards her desk. You're brilliant at your job, Maya. But as I said, the job is only half of it. I need to know my senior manager is loyal, completely loyal, to me. This was it. And the dinner? I prompted, my voice barely a whisper. The nightcap. Was that a test of my loyalty? She laughed, a low, condescending sound. Of course, everything is a test. I need to know you're willing to do what it takes, that you understand our relationship isn't just from 9 to 5. It's a partnership, a very intimate partnership. She leaned against her desk, crossing her arms. I invest in you, you invest in me. You make me happy, I make you successful. It's a simple transaction. Are you ready to make that transaction? My blood ran cold, but I kept my face a mask of nervous compliance. So if I commit to this partnership, I chose my words carefully, the senior project manager position is mine, guaranteed, the moment you walk out of my apartment. Tomorrow morning, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. Consider it your signing bonus. I had it. I had everything I needed. The recording in my pocket felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I had her confession, her proposition, her vile, transactional view of my entire career. I understand, I said, finally letting a small, submissive smile touch my lips. It tasted like ash. Good, she said, clearly pleased with herself. I knew you were a smart girl. I nodded, backing towards the door. I'll need to go home first to get ready. Of course, she purred. Take your time. I'll be waiting. I walked out of her office, my legs shaking so badly I could barely stand. I didn't go to the elevator. I went straight to the nearest restroom, locked myself in a stall, and stopped the recording. My hands trembled as I saved the file, renaming it evidence. Then I leaned my head against the cool metal of the stall door and vomited into the toilet. The revulsion was overwhelming, but underneath it, a white-hot core of triumph was beginning to glow. I had her. I had the monster on tape. I took the next day off. I called in sick, my voice genuinely shaky. I couldn't face the office. I couldn't look at her. I spent the entire day in my apartment listening to the recording over and over again. Each time I heard her smug, predatory voice lay out the terms of my transaction, a fresh wave of nausea and rage washed over me. It was vile. It was damning. It was perfect. Clara texted me every hour. Are you okay? Did you get it? Don't do anything until you have a plan. The plan was simple. Human resources. It was their entire purpose, wasn't it? to handle situations exactly like this? I had a naive, almost touching faith in the system. I believed that with this irrefutable proof, they would have no choice but to act. Justice would be swift and decisive. Oh, how little I knew about the cogs of the corporate machine. I scheduled a meeting with the head of HR for the following morning. Her name was Lena Petrova, a woman in her late 40s with a reputation for being thorough, fair, and utterly by the book. I walked into her office, a small, functional space that was the polar opposite of Evelyn's opulent fortress, and felt a surge of hope. This was a place of rules and procedures. This was where the monster would be slain. Lena was impeccably dressed in a gray suit, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun. Her eyes were intelligent and her expression was neutral, betraying nothing. "Maya," she said, gesturing to a chair, "thank you for coming in. Your email said you had a sensitive matter to discuss." "Yes," I said, my throat tight. "I do." My hands trembled as I pulled my phone from my bag. "It concerns Evelyn Vance. She made the senior manager promotion conditional on my willingness to engage in a personal relationship with her." Lena's expression didn't flicker. She simply picked up a pen. "Can you be more specific?" Words failed me. How could I describe the filth of that conversation? "It's better if you just listen," I said, my voice shaking. I found the file named Evidence and placed the phone on the desk between us. I pressed play. The room filled with the sound of my recording. My own nervous, quiet voice, and Evelyn's loud, confident damning. "A very intimate partnership. You make me happy. I make you successful. The moment you walk out of my apartment tomorrow morning, consider it your signing bonus." As the recording played, I watched Lena's face. I expected shock, outrage, horror. I saw none of it. Her expression remained a carefully neutral mask, but I saw a muscle twitch in her jaw, a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't shock. It was weary recognition. It was the look of a woman who had heard a story like this before. When the recording finished, a heavy silence fell over the room. Lena let out a long, slow breath. She clicked her pen a few times, the sound unnervingly loud. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention, Maya," she said, her tone formal and distant. "This is obviously a very serious allegation." "It's not an allegation," I said, my voice rising with a note of panic. "It's proof." "You just heard it." "Yes," she agreed calmly. "I heard it. We will need a copy of that recording, and we will be launching a full and thorough investigation immediately." She looked me straight in the eye. "This matter is now in the hands of our. It is imperative that you do not discuss this with anyone. Not your colleagues, not your friends here. Anyone. Do you understand?" "But what happens now?" I asked. "I have to keep working with her." "For now, yes," Lena said. "It's important to maintain normalcy while we conduct our due diligence. We will be in touch." She stood up. The meeting was over. I walked out of her office in a daze. I had brought them the head of the dragon on a silver platter, and they had thanked me for my time and told me to go back to my desk. The hope I had felt just minutes before was rapidly being replaced by a cold, creeping dread. I hadn't slain the monster. I had just pointed it out to the zookeepers, and I was beginning to realize their first priority wasn't protecting the other animals. It was protecting the zoo. Maintaining normalcy was impossible. The next week was a special kind of hell. Evelyn was furious. She didn't say anything to me directly, but she didn't have to. Her rage was a palpable force. She'd walk past my desk and a cold draft would follow in her wake. In team meetings, she would ask for my input and then cut me off mid-sentence, dismissing my ideas with a flick of her wrist. She was isolating me, undermining me professionally, making it clear to everyone that I was no longer in her favor. My colleagues noticed. The office, once a place of friendly collaboration, became a minefield of shifting allegiances. People who had been my friends now gave me nervous, tight-lipped smiles and avoided my gaze. They knew something had happened, that a war had been declared between me and Evelyn, and they were all desperately trying to stay out of the line of fire. Only Clara remained steadfast, offering quiet words of support in the break room and sending me encouraging texts. "Stay strong. You have the truth on your side." The HR investigation was a black box. I heard nothing. I would email Lena for an update and receive a terse, formal reply. "The matter is still under investigation. We appreciate your patience." Patience. It felt like they were waiting for me to break, for me to quit and make the whole problem disappear. Then the whispers started. I'd walk past a conversation and it would die down instantly. I'd catch people looking at me, their expressions a mixture of pity and suspicion. The narrative was being twisted. I overheard snippets, making it all up for a payday. She was failing on the new account and got Desperate, always so ambitious. She'd do anything. Evelyn was poisoning the well. Unable to attack me directly, she was assassinating my character, painting me as an unstable, vindictive liar. It was brilliant, it was evil, and it was working. The doubt was a cancer spreading through the office floor. People were starting to believe her version of the story. One afternoon, Isabel the peacock, the one who was so eager to please, stopped by my desk. She leaned in close, her voice a venomous whisper. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but it's not going to work," she hissed. "Evelyn is a good person. She's a mentor. You're just a pathetic little snake trying to ruin her career because you couldn't cut it." I stared at her, speechless. Did she really believe that? Or was she just parroting the words of her patron, hoping to score points? It didn't matter. The effect was the same. I felt utterly and completely alone. That night I went home and broke down. I sat on my kitchen floor clutching the bottle of wine I had bought but not opened and sobbed, raw, ugly, gut-wrenching sobs. I had done the right thing. I had stood up for myself, and my reward was to be ostracized, vilified, and professionally crucified. I had brought the evidence, the smoking gun, and it had been turned on me. The system wasn't working. It was protecting itself. It was protecting the powerful, and I was being crushed in the gears. Just when I was about to give up, to write my letter of resignation and retreat from the battlefield bruised and defeated, a small crack of light appeared in the darkness. It came in the form of an anonymous email. The subject line was just one word: believe. The body of the email was short: "You're not crazy. She did it to me too, 3 years ago. I didn't have a recording. I had nothing. They paid me to leave and sign an NDA. Don't let them silence you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The woman Clara had mentioned, the ghost from the past, she was real. I wasn't alone. Someone else knew the truth. This small act of solidarity, this message from a stranger, was the reinforcement I desperately needed. It was like a hand reaching out in the darkness, pulling me back to my feet. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to let them silence me. The next day, HR finally made a move. Lena called me into her office. Evelyn had been placed on administrative leave pending the conclusion of the investigation. It was a procedural step, not an admission of guilt, but it was something. A small victory. "We need to interview other employees, people on your team, people who reported to Miss Vance," Lena explained, her tone as neutral as ever. "We need to establish if there's a pattern of behavior." A pattern of behavior. The phrase echoed in my mind. They had the recording. They had my testimony. They had an anonymous email from another victim. And still they needed more. They weren't building a case against Evelyn. They were building a fortress for the company. They needed to prove that her actions were those of a single rogue agent, not a symptom of a toxic culture they had allowed to fester. The interviews began. It made the office environment even more toxic. My team members were pulled into meetings with HR and a stony-faced lawyer from the corporate counsel's office. They would emerge an hour later looking pale and shaken. They were being asked to choose a side, to testify for or against a powerful executive who might very well be back at her desk in a week. It was an impossible position, and I felt a fresh wave of guilt for putting them in it. Evelyn, though not physically present, was still a looming specter. Her allies in upper management were closing ranks. I heard that she had hired a high-powered PR firm and a ruthless legal team. She was preparing for war, and I was her primary target. The pressure was immense. I was barely sleeping. I lost weight. My focus at work was shot. The project I was leading began to suffer, my carefully laid plans unraveling due to my own distraction and the palpable tension within my team. I was providing Evelyn with the very ammunition she needed to prove I was incompetent. I was failing, and a terrifying thought began to creep into my mind. What if I won the battle but lost the war? What if I took down Evelyn but destroyed my own career in the process? The victory I had envisioned, a triumphant return to a grateful office, was a childish fantasy. The reality was a bloody, protracted war of attrition, and I wasn't sure I had the strength to survive it. The breaking point came during a meeting with my own team. We were reviewing the quarterly projections for a major project, and the numbers were bad. Deadlines had been missed and key deliverables were lagging. It was a direct result of the chaos Evelyn had unleashed, but on paper it just looked like my failure. One of my team members, a junior analyst named Sarah, who had always been timid and anxious, finally snapped. "This is a disaster, Maya," she burst out, her voice trembling. "We're going to lose this client. This never would have happened if Miss Vance were still here." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. No one contradicted her. They just stared at their notepads, refusing to meet my eyes. In their silence, I heard their agreement. They blamed me for the investigation, for the tension, for the project's failure. It wasn't fair, it wasn't logical, but it was the truth. I walked out of that meeting and went straight to Clara's desk. I need a lawyer, I said, my voice flat and dead. A real one, not the corporate suits and HR who are only looking out for the company. I need someone who is looking out for me. Clara nodded, her expression grim. She had been saying it for weeks. She scribbled a name and number on a sticky note. Her name is Julia Croft. She's a shark, and she specializes in eating corporations like ours for breakfast. My first meeting with Julia Croft was a revelation. She was a woman in her 50s with fiery red hair and an even fierier attitude. She listened to my entire story without interruption, her sharp eyes missing nothing. I played her the recording. Unlike Lena at HR, she didn't hide her reaction. A slow, predatory smile spread across her face. "Oh, honey," she said when it was over. "They are so screwed." For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of power. Julia laid out the reality of the situation in blunt and sparing terms. HR is not your friend, she explained, pacing her office. Their job is to mitigate risk for the company. Right now you are a risk. They are trying to contain you. They'll complete their investigation. They'll probably fire Vance, and they'll offer you the promotion and a pat on the back, hoping you'll be a good little soldier and shut up about it. She stopped pacing and looked me straight in the eye. But they are vulnerable. They have a VP on tape soliciting sex for a promotion. They have a prior victim. They have a toxic work environment that you can testify to under oath. They are terrified of you, of this going public, of a lawsuit. That's our leverage. Not the recording itself, but the threat of what we can do with it. It was a cynical, brutal way of looking at the world, but it was also the truth. I had been naive to think that HR would be my savior. This wasn't a matter of morality. It was a matter of leverage and liability. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We let them finish their little investigation," Julia said with a shark-like grin. "We let them fire her, and then just when they think the problem is solved, we send them a letter. And we don't ask for a promotion. We ask for a reckoning." Leaving her office, I felt like I had shed a skin, the skin of the compliant employee, the naive believer in the system. I had walked in a victim. I walked out a plaintiff. 2 weeks later it happened. Lena called me into her office. The investigation was complete. After a thorough review of the evidence and multiple interviews, she began. Her voice the same infuriatingly calm monotone. "We have decided to terminate Evelyn Vance's employment with Sterling Corp, effective immediately." I waited for a feeling of triumph, of elation. It didn't come. I just felt empty, numb. Furthermore, Lena continued, sliding a letter across the desk. "The position of senior project manager is yours. Congratulations. We trust that you will continue to be a valuable asset to the company." I looked at the offer letter. It was everything I had wanted 3 months ago, my dream job, but now it just felt like a bribe. "Hush money. Thank you," I said, my voice flat. I took the letter and left. The news of Evelyn's firing spread through the office like wildfire. The whispers changed. I was no longer the villain. I was the victor, the dragon's lair. People who had avoided me for weeks now offered me congratulations in the hallway. They smiled at me in the kitchen. It was disgusting. Their loyalty shifted with the corporate winds, and I wanted no part of it. Isabel shot me a look of pure hatred across the office, her face pale. Her patron saint had fallen, and she was left stranded. I felt a brief, sharp pang of satisfaction before it was replaced by a wave of weariness. I was so tired of the game. That afternoon, a letter from Julia Croft was messengered to Sterling Corp's legal department. It was a masterwork of legal aggression. It detailed Evelyn's harassment, the company's slow and inadequate response, the retaliatory environment I had been forced to endure, and the emotional distress it had caused. It mentioned the previous victim, and hinted that there might be others. It concluded with a clear statement: "We were prepared to file a lawsuit that would make the company's negligence and toxic culture a matter of public record, unless of course they preferred to discuss a settlement." The corporate response was immediate. The friendly congratulations stopped. A wall of ice descended. All communication was now to go through Julia. The promotion was still technically mine, but no one would onboard me. I was in limbo. A ghost haunting the halls again, but this time a much more terrifying one. The battle wasn't over. It had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. This was no longer about me and Evelyn. It was about me versus a multi-million-dollar corporation and its army of lawyers. And I was starting to realize that winning wouldn't mean getting the promotion. Winning would mean getting out alive. The negotiations were a brutal, drawn-out war fought by proxy. Julia would call me after every meeting with Sterling's lawyers, her voice buzzing with a kind of savage glee. "They're terrified," she'd report. "They started with a lowball offer, the standard severance package and a gag order so tight you wouldn't be able to say the word Sterling in your sleep." "What did you say?" I'd ask. "I laughed," Julia would cackle. "I told them we'd see them in court and that I'd already spoken to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal." She hadn't, but they didn't know that. The company's strategy was to wear me down. They'd drag their feet. They'd cancel meetings at the last minute. They sent their lawyers to nitpick every single one of our claims. They were trying to bleed me dry emotionally and financially, hoping I'd get tired and take whatever they offered. Meanwhile, my life at the office was unbearable. I was a pariah. I had been assigned to a holding pattern, given meaningless tasks to keep me busy while the legal battle raged. My team had been reassigned. The senior manager role sat empty, a monument to the whole sordid affair. I was being paid to sit at my desk and do nothing. It was a gilded cage designed to drive me insane. Clara was my only lifeline. We'd have lunch in the park, far from the prying eyes of the office. "How are you holding up?" she'd ask, her own face etched with worry. "I feel like a ghost," I admitted one day, pushing a piece of lettuce around my plate. "I won, Clara. I got her fired. So why does it feel like I lost?" "Because the fight isn't what you thought it was," she said wisely. "You thought it was about right and wrong, but it's about money and power. You exposed the rot in the system, and the system is not happy about it." She was right. I had wanted justice. The company wanted damage control. The promotion I had coveted for so long now seemed like a poisoned chalice. Even if I won and they let me take the job, my career there was over. I would always be that woman. The troublemaker. The one who sued. I would never be trusted. I would never get another significant project. I would be sidelined until I quit. Julia called me late one Thursday night. "They've blinked," she said, her voice serious for once. "They've come back with a real offer, a very real offer." She laid out the terms: a financial settlement that was more money than I had ever dreamed of, full payment of my legal fees, and a non-disclosure agreement. "The NDA is the sticking point," Julia said. "It's their pound of flesh. They want your silence. They need to know you will never ever speak of Evelyn Vance or this investigation specifically." This was the crossroads. I could take the money, sign the papers, and walk away. Disappear. Start a new life financially secure beyond my wildest dreams. Or I could refuse, proceed with the lawsuit, and risk everything for the principle of the thing, for the right to tell my story. What did I want? A few months ago, the answer would have been clear: justice at any cost. But I was tired. I was bruised and battered from the fight. The thought of a years-long court battle, of having my life and character dissected in a public forum, was exhausting. "What do you think?" I asked Julia. "I think," she said carefully, "that you have to decide what victory looks like to you now. Not what it looked like when you started this fight. Is victory a public spectacle? Or is it a quiet, comfortable, and very well-funded new beginning?" I spent the entire weekend wrestling with the decision. I walked for hours around the city, ending up at the waterfront, staring at the endless gray expanse of the water. The settlement offer was life-changing money. It was never worry about a mortgage again money. It was start your own business money. It was freedom. The NDA was the price of that freedom. It felt like a betrayal of the anonymous woman who had reached out to me. A betrayal of the next woman Evelyn Vance might target at her next job. But Evelyn had been fired. I had accomplished that. And a public lawsuit wouldn't guarantee a better outcome for anyone. It would just be a bigger, messier fight. I thought about my career. The ambition that had driven me to work so hard for that promotion felt like a distant memory. My passion for the work had been extinguished, drowned in the toxic flood of the past few months. I couldn't imagine walking back into Sterling Corp or any corporation like it and feeling anything other than dread. The game was rigged, and I didn't want to play anymore. On Sunday night, I called Julia. "I want to counter," I said. "Okay," she replied, intrigued. "What are your terms?" "I'll accept their financial offer," I said, taking a deep breath. "But I want to change the NDA. I will agree never to mention Evelyn Vance or Sterling Corp by name. I will never detail the specifics of this case, but I will not be silenced from speaking about my experiences in general terms. I want the right to talk about workplace harassment, about quid pro quo propositions, about the failures of HR systems. I want to be able to use what happened to me to help other people. That's my term. It's non-negotiable." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Julia let out a low whistle. She said, a note of genuine admiration in her voice. That's a brilliant move. It gives them the legal protection they crave while giving you the moral victory you need. They'd be fools not to take it. It turned out they weren't fools. They were desperate to make the problem go away. After a brief, token resistance, they agreed. The day I went to sign the papers was gray and overcast, matching my mood. I met Julia at the law offices of Sterling's counsel. The room was filled with stony-faced lawyers in expensive suits. No one from my old office was there. No Lena. No one. I was a problem being solved, a line item being closed. I signed my name over and over again, my hand steady. With each stroke of the pen, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. When it was done, one of the lawyers handed me a check. I looked at the number. It was obscene. It felt like monopoly money. I walked out of that building with Julia by my side. I didn't look back. As we stepped onto the sidewalk, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time all day. So, Julia said, shielding her eyes, what now? I looked up at the sliver of blue sky between the towering skyscrapers. I have no idea, I said, and for the first time in a very long time, that felt like the most exciting answer in the world. My last day at Sterling Corp was quiet. I didn't have a party or a farewell lunch. I just packed the few personal items from my desk into a small cardboard box, a coffee mug, a framed photo of my college friends, a motivational paperweight. Clara had given me that, said nevertheless, she persisted. Clara came over to my desk as I was getting ready to leave. Her eyes were sad. So this is it, she said. This is it, I confirmed. Thank you, Clara, for everything. I couldn't have done it without you. You were the brave one, she said, pulling me into a fierce hug. Don't you ever forget that. You give 'em hell out there, you hear me? I will, I promised. I walked out of the office for the last time, my small box in my arms. The security guard at the front desk didn't even look up. I was already a ghost. The first few weeks of freedom were disorienting. I slept. I went to museums in the middle of the day. I read novels in the park. I slowly began to decompress from the months of relentless, soul-crushing stress. The corporate world with its deadlines and politics and forced pleasantries began to feel like a strange dream. The money sat in my bank account, a silent, powerful testament to my ordeal. I used some of it to buy a small condo in a quieter part of the city, one with a balcony and lots of natural light. I started cooking again. I started reconnecting with friends I had neglected. I was slowly, carefully rebuilding my life from the ground up. One day I got a call from Julia Croft. I've got someone I think you should meet, she said. Her name is Dr. Anya Sharma. She runs a nonprofit that consults with companies to build better, safer workplace cultures. She's looking for someone with real-world experience to help develop her training programs. Someone who knows what it's really like in the trenches. Your name came to mind. I met with Dr. Sharma the following week. She was a warm, brilliant woman who listened to my story, the redacted and a compliant version, with deep empathy and intellectual rigor. What happened to you is a systemic failure, she said, and the only way to fix a system is from the inside out. We give employees the language to identify harassment. We give HR departments the tools to investigate it properly. And we teach leaders how to build cultures of respect so that predators like your former boss can't thrive in the first place. She offered me a job, not as an employee but as a partner, a consultant, my own boss. I thought about it for a long time. It wasn't a path I had ever imagined for myself, but it felt right. It felt like a way to transmute my pain into purpose, a way to honor the terms of my own victory. I had fought for the right to use my experience, and here was a chance to do exactly that. I said yes. The work was challenging and deeply rewarding. I traveled the country with Anya, leading workshops and training sessions. I stood in front of boardrooms filled with executives, women and men who looked just like the ones who had tried to silence me, and I told my story. My carefully worded anonymous story. I talked about the subtle but not subtle blurring of professional lines. I talked about the isolation and character assassination that follows a complaint. I described the feeling of being a pawn in a game between HR and the legal department. I never mentioned Evelyn Vance's name. I never mentioned Sterling Corp. I didn't have to. The specifics didn't matter. The power of the story was in its universality. In every room I would see a flicker of recognition in someone's eyes. A young woman who would approach me afterwards, her voice trembling as she asked for advice. An HR manager who would admit their system was broken. A CEO who would genuinely want to do better. I was taking the ugliest experience of my life and turning it into a tool for change. I was no longer a victim or a plaintiff. I was an advocate, an expert. I had found my voice again, and it was stronger than ever before. One evening after a long workshop in Chicago, I was scrolling through the news on my phone. A small article from a business journal caught my eye. It was about a corporate merger. A mid-sized tech company had been acquired by a larger firm. In the article was a list of the executives who would be let go as a result of the restructuring. Near the bottom of the list was a familiar name, Isabel. My old rival. The peacock. I felt a brief, fleeting image of her spitting venom at me by my desk. I wondered where she would go now without her powerful patron to clear a path for her. For a moment, I felt a sliver of pity, then I let it go. Her story was not my story. I had my own path to walk. I closed the article and looked out my hotel window at the glittering city lights. I had once thought those lights viewed from a corner office were the ultimate prize. How small that dream seemed to me. Now, the power I had now wasn't borrowed from a title or a company. It was my own, forged in fire, tempered by injustice, and it could never be taken away from me. Years went by. My consulting firm flourished. Anya and I became a well-respected force in the field of corporate ethics. We wrote a book together. We testified as expert witnesses. We actually started to see a shift in the way companies approach these issues, a slow-moving but undeniable tide of change. I never heard from or about Evelyn Vance again. She had disappeared, a ghost of a past I had long since moved on from. Her name was a footnote in a story that had become so much bigger than her. I bought a small house upstate, a quiet place with a garden where I could escape the city. I adopted a dog. I learned to bake bread. I found a quiet, steady love with a woman who was a landscape architect whose hands were always covered in dirt and who didn't care about corporate ladders or power plays. Our life was simple and good. One afternoon, I was giving a keynote speech at a large women's leadership conference. The auditorium was packed. As I stood at the podium looking out at the sea of faces, young, ambitious women at the start of their careers, I felt a profound sense of connection. I saw my younger self in them, the hunger, the hope, the naivete. I told my story, the story of a boss who demanded a date for a promotion, the story of a recording of an HR department that failed, of a legal battle that nearly broke me. And I told them about the choice I made, the choice not just to fight but to define what victory meant for me. Power is not a corner office. I told them, my voice ringing with a clarity and conviction that came from deep within my soul. Power is not a title or a salary. Real power is the ability to write your own story. It's the courage to speak your truth even when your voice shakes. It's the resilience to take the worst thing that has ever happened to you and turn it into the source of your greatest strength. When I finished, the room was silent for a beat. Then it erupted, a wave of applause that felt like a physical force. Women were on their feet, their faces shining with emotion. It wasn't just applause for me, it was for them. For every woman who had ever been underestimated, harassed, or silenced. It was a roar of solidarity, a battle cry. As I stepped away from the podium, my heart full, I knew I had found my purpose. I had lost a promotion and a career I thought I wanted. But I had gained something so much more valuable. I had gained myself, my voice, my power, and I was going to spend the rest of my life using it. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm. Work was fulfilling, home was peaceful. My partner, a wonderful woman named Sasha, and I built a life that was rich in a way stock options could never be. A life filled with laughter, good food, and long walks in the woods with our dog. The trauma of my experience with Evelyn and Sterling Corp had faded, not into nothingness, but into a scar. A scar that reminded me of a battle I had fought and won, a battle that had ultimately led me to this place of peace. One day, I received an email with a subject line that made my blood run cold for just a second. A voice from Sterling Corp. My finger hovered over the delete button, my old fight or flight instincts kicking in. Curiosity, however, won out. I opened it. It was from Lena Petrova, the former head of our, the woman with the neutral face and the soul of a bureaucrat. The email was brief. She had left Sterling Corp a year after I did. She was writing to apologize. Maya, I know this is years too late, and I do not expect a reply, but I wanted to say I am sorry. You were right, and our system was wrong. Your case was the catalyst for me to realize that I was no longer mitigating risk. I was enabling a culture of abuse. I spent my days protecting the corporation, not the people within it. I left that world, and I just wanted you to know that your courage had an impact that you were never able to see. I hope you are well. Lanai read the email 3 times. An apology, a confession, proof that my fight, my ordeal had sent ripples out into the world. I couldn't have imagined. Lena, the embodiment of the corporate machine, had developed a conscience. It was a stunning, gratifying piece of closure I never knew I needed. I thought about replying, but what was there to say? The past was the past. I closed the email and went out into the garden where Sasha was planting tulips. I knelt in the dirt, beside her, the smell of the earth, rich and real. This was my life now, not a world of emails and NDAs and hollow apologies. A world of dirt and flowers and love. What are you smiling at? Sasha asked, wiping a smudge of soil from my cheek. Just a ghost being laid to rest, I said. She didn't ask for details. She just smiled and handed me a trowel. And together, we planted the future. A few years later, my book became required reading in the MBA program of a prestigious university. I was invited to be a guest lecturer for a semester, teaching a course on business ethics. It was surreal, standing in front of a lecture hall, a professor, when my only real qualification was having survived the very worst of what business could be. On the last day of the course, a young woman approached me. She was sharp, ambitious, with the same fire in her eyes I once had. "Professor," she said, "your story, it's inspiring, but it's also terrifying. You won, but you had to leave. What about the women who can't afford to leave, who don't have a recording or the option of a settlement?" It was a question I had asked myself many times. That's why the fight can't just be individual, I told her. My story is about one person fighting a battle, but the war is won when we build cultures where those battles don't have to be fought in the first place. I pointed to her and the other students in the hall. The war is won by you, by the kind of leaders you decide to be. It's won by creating transparency, accountability, and real, zero-tolerance policies. My story is a cautionary tale. Your careers can be the solution. She nodded, a look of profound understanding on her face. Thank you, she said. Walking off that campus, I felt a sense of hope. The world wasn't perfect. There would always be more Evelyn Vances, but there would also be more women like this student, more Claras, more Julias, even perhaps more Lenas who eventually found their way. The world was changing, one story, one lawsuit, one newly emboldened student at a time. My fight had started with a single, demeaning demand for a date. It had been a fight for a promotion, then for justice, then for my own survival. But it had become something else entirely. It had become a platform, a purpose, a legacy. And it was a legacy built not on the ashes of my old career, but on the solid foundation of my own, hard-won strength.